Hello there. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the live stream. I'm Father Roderick. It is now my time, which is Amsterdam time zone. 30 minutes past the hour, past 4. And I'm streaming this to YouTube, my main channel. I'm streaming this to Facebook, my page. And for the first time, I'm streaming this to Twitter. I have no idea how this works, but apparently there is also, I didn't even know that there was a streaming option on Twitter, so that's very cool. I do this every week. I record a podcast, and I invite the community to join me. That's why I wear these goofy headphones. And later on, the audio version of the podcast will be available on the stream. The show is called The Break with Father Roderick. That would be me. And we talk about a whole lot of different topics: pop culture, movies, television shows. I talk about faith. I explain stuff that Catholics do, answer questions. We talk about technology, about basically anything that's happening in the world that is of interest to me. We even go into my kitchen, and I will teach you some of my recipes, and I will tell you about my kitchen disasters, which kind of often happen. This is also an interactive moment of the week, so I invite you to, if you can, I think the only place where you can't do that is on Twitter, but if you are on Facebook or on YouTube, feel free to ask questions, introduce yourself, post comments. I won't always be able to reply directly because sometimes when I'm in the middle of the recording, I'll have to focus on what I'm going to say. But I always, after I'm done with the show, I go back to the chat and we can talk a little bit more. So Margot is here. Veronica's here too, both on Facebook. I hope the thing is also working on YouTube. I wasn't sure that this was going to work on Facebook, by the way, because I initiated the stream a while ago, and Facebook, I think, is very strict. If you start too late, after about 10 minutes or so, it just won't allow you to stream anymore. But once I went live, the thing is, I'm using the built-in webcam of my MacBook, which is fine for the stream because it's kind of low quality. Normally, I'd rather use a professional camera, but for some reason, I couldn't get it to work with this particular streaming software that I'm using. I can use a professional camera when I'm on a Windows PC, so it's kind of unfair that it works on Windows, but it doesn't work on a Mac. But then I was looking at the overall image, and since I can only use the built-in webcam, you get basically my office in the back. So I can't really, I would have to turn everything around to show you the nice bookshelves and do the colored lighting and everything. So that doesn't work. Instead, you basically look at a blank wall and the bookshelves from the wrong angle. And then I was like, okay, but that doesn't look very appealing to me. It's not very colorful. And then I was like, well, wait a minute. What if I do like a nice, almost like a frame around the screen, which this StreamYard software allows me to do. And I will just make a gap in the middle through which you look at me. And then I can add colors. And so and I always, when I get into these rat holes or rabbit holes, maybe, I just get lost in coming up with a new layout. So I spent half an hour in Canva making this particular layout. So that's why I'm starting half an hour later than usual, but at least we're here. So hopefully YouTube works. Hopefully Twitter works. I'm going to take a look. God, I'm curious as to what that looks like. Can I even see this if I go to my own page? So I always use TweetDeck. That doesn't really give me an indication as to what people on Twitter are seeing. There we go. Go to twitter.com/Father Roderick. Again, I have no idea how that works on Twitter. Are they still using that old? Wait. Okay. I was like, my account does not exist anymore. It's Father Roderick with double R. Okay, here we go. So I go to my main page. Oh, yeah. And then there is a post 4 minutes ago. And it says what Bible readers can learn from the She-Hulk finale. And then it has a play button, which I think if I press it, it will probably go live. Anyway, interesting. I won't do that because otherwise we get audio problems when the sound starts to loop. But since we're already starting so late, I might say, hey, Michel, bonjour, bon après-midi. Michelle is one of my old friends from seminary. We've been in seminary together in Belgium, like 180 years ago, at least for me. And so since he's on Facebook, he apparently also caught the stream. That's very cool. That's the wonderful thing about social media. That's what I like about these live streams. You never know who's going to hop in. And I try to do live shows every day of the week. I started yesterday doing like a Star Wars chat hour. And I wanted to do like a review of the first 6 episodes of Andor, of the new show, prepared a whole commentary. And then, of course, I was like, okay, I'm only going to talk 10 minutes per episode. Well, you know me, it's about Star Wars. So I just kept going on and on and on. Only was able to do 3 episodes. So after this one, I'll go live on, well, actually also for those of you that are watching this on YouTube, I'll be live on this channel as well for the next 3 episodes of Andor. And then I probably also should do the Rings of Power finale, but I haven't watched that yet. So maybe that's something for next week. We'll see. But I like this. I like StreamYard. What I like about StreamYard, that's what I was going to say, is that it allows me to stream to multiple destinations. So I'm streaming this on 3 channels, and I think I can even stream this subsequently on, or concurrently, I should say, on Twitch and even on LinkedIn, which is also a platform that I have not used that much in the past, but I'm thinking of deploying there a little bit more. Anyway, doesn't matter. Hey, DJ, watching this on YouTube, so that's very cool. Shows me that both YouTube and Facebook are working. So for those of you that are just watching this, or maybe watching this afterwards, so this is kind of an atypical live stream for me. Normally, a live stream always has one particular topic. So I will talk about anime for an hour. I will talk about Star Wars for an hour, or about anything else. This is the only hour in the week that I talk about everything, because it's basically a live stream of my podcast, which is about everything. You'll see it in a minute when I start the show. There are going to be about 6 or 7 different topics per show, which reminds me, at the beginning of each episode, I always greet the new patrons. But then, of course, I need to figure out who those new patrons are. So Patreon, let's see. Do we have any new patrons? I think so. Well, we have Brian, who upped his monthly contribution. That's very cool. So let me add that to the list. I always work with show notes on OneNote. Actually, the cool thing about this software is I can show you my desktop. I think. Can I? I say that I can, but I'm not even sure if I can. Present? No, present. I think I can present this. Okay, so slides, share screen. Oh, okay. Share screen. And then I can pick a window or even a Chrome tab. Wow. Okay, that's very cool. But I don't want to show a Chrome tab. I want to show you my show notes here. This is a little bit behind the scenes stuff. I've never shown this before because I couldn't technically, but now I can. So now I'm sharing this. But can you see it? Yeah, you can see it. Oh, it kind of takes over the entire screen. So this is what my show notes look like. It's just I'm zoomed in. So I've got on top week 41, and then you've got the whole list of topics, and I usually work with bullet points. So you see the different topics. I added a little icon that's just for me, so it stands out a little bit more. And this is all. It's just a few, and then I can see that I forgot to even add a thought of the day. Very typical. I start a show without really knowing what I'm going to talk about. And the rest, of course, I do have things to say. Otherwise, I wouldn't add this to the show notes. But I don't write it out. I don't want to lose the spontaneity. How do I get back to where I was? Okay, let me just get rid of this. Yeah, there we go. I'm back. And then maybe I may want to stop sharing my show notes. There we go. Hey, Liz. Don't worry about She-Hulk. I will talk about She-Hulk, but I won't spoil what happens. I'll just talk about like a general thing that they're doing with the finale and that they've been doing with the entire show, which I think is instructive in a way that you might not expect. So that was my show notes. What was I saying? Oh, yes, the thought of the day. Let me add that. And I was in the middle. Sometimes I'm very ADD, as you can imagine. This is my brain where it's like constant. Oh, I need to do that. Oh, wait, I also need to do that. Wait, I forgot to do that. Okay, so do we have any new patrons? Patrons? Aaron, but I think, oh no, we do have new patrons. When was the last episode? That's always important for me to know, because then I know who's been in the, oh, wait a minute, I can see that in the chat, in the show notes as well. I just go to the show notes of week 40, where the last one was Laz. Okay, so Laz, where are my... Okay, so we've got Galaxy Lord 1954 EX. I'm sure that is an official name and not at all a screen name. So Galaxy Lord 1954. Sorry to do this live on the air. Galaxy Lord 1954 EX. Whoops. Almost sounds like a training program. Like P90X. Galaxy Lord EX. The next patron was Aaron. Very cool. I love it that we get new patrons. The community is growing. All right, Aaron. And then we've got Brian. Already mentioned that. So that is cool. I think we're good to go. No, thought of the day or thought of the week. That'll be easy. Oh, I just saw a thought and now it jumps away. Do you have that with Instagram? You start Instagram and then you still see what you were looking at when you close down the app? And then I can't find it anymore. Okay. Oh, this is cool. Desiderius Erasmus. Oh, I like this one. Schopenhauer. Let's go philosophical. I love that. Okay, so I won't spoil it. You'll have to stick around. Arthur Schopenhauer. That's a good quote. Very appropriate. Very appropriate. And then this one. Yes. Okay. I am fired up. I'm ready to go. So if you're ready as well, then we're good to go. All righty. Hey, Chris. Thanks for watching. And Chris didn't like She-Hulk. Really? Oh, well. Everyone is entitled to his or her own opinion, of course. But I will give you mine. All right, let's get going. Turn up the volume for the jingles. I go to the top of my show notes, and here we go. Hey everybody, I'm Father Roderick, and you are listening to The Break. And this is your weekly break where we talk about a lot of things. Today, I'm going to talk about the finale of She-Hulk, spoiler-free, so don't worry if you haven't seen it yet. We'll talk about what She-Hulk can mean for Bible readers, and maybe also for Bible thumpers, and way more than that, of course, as I do every week. This show is brought to you thanks to my patrons over at patreon.com/Father Roderick. I'm so grateful for their help, for their support, and also for their input, because patrons play a pivotal role in helping me to make the right choices. And especially these past few weeks, we've gone through a lot of changes, or not really changes, but I've started to curate more what I do. I talked about energy leaks in my other episodes that I published previously. So go listen to those if you haven't done so already. So literal energy leaks, because the winter is coming. Winter is coming. But so I'm trying to stop the energy leaks in my house because the prices are so high. So I'm trying to minimize my energy use. I'm also trying to minimize the heat that is leaking from this old building because it's very badly insulated. But then I kind of continued this process by also trying to stop some energy leaks in my own personal life and in my professional life. Like, where is my energy going? You can only do so many things. So it's up to me to make the right choices. Where do I invest my energy? And that has led me with a lot of discernment that came from my community and from my patrons to stop doing a couple of things so I can do the things that I really want to do and that you want me to do, that I can do those better. So I've been purging a number of my channels, a lot of my social media stuff that nobody really followed anyway. And I'm currently in the process of condensing stuff on YouTube, because I had a lot of YouTube channels, but I'm slowly bringing that together. I do the same with my live streams. So I try to be very efficient in the sense that I'm doing one live stream, but then I can use StreamYard, which is software that I often use for live streams, and I can just show it to Twitter, show it to Facebook, show it to YouTube, and it's all automatic. So it's really easy to set up, doesn't cost me much energy. I can see all the comments, and it doesn't really matter where people post a comment. It all goes into one funnel in a certain way. Simple, small things, but they're such a great way for me to save my energy. Now, one important thing that I want to do, this is kind of like a public announcement here, but of course, if you follow me on other platforms like social media or on Patreon, you already know this. But since the beginning of COVID and basically the lockdowns, when that started, I was like, okay, I need to do something, because so many people would like to go to church, but it's just dangerous. And in many places, it was even forbidden to go to church. We here in the Netherlands, for instance, were asked by our bishop to stream our masses as much as possible. A lot of churches back then didn't even know how to do that. They had never thought about using digital media to reach out to their parishioners. But now they had to, because there was no other way to reach out. And so that's what a lot of churches did. And I started doing that as well. I was back then in a different parish, so we set up a whole system with like multiple cameras. I had a ton of people helping me. And so we've been doing that all along for more than 2 years. It's already 2 years ago that I started that. And then, of course, I moved into this parish. There was a lot of change happening, but also the world around me changed. Of course, the COVID is still with us, and a number of my friends are currently even suffering still from COVID infection. And maybe if you're listening to this and you too have COVID, I hope you'll all recover. But it's much less dangerous than it used to be. It can still be risky, but we now have a vaccination. The COVID variants that are currently doing the rounds are much less aggressive than the ones that we had in the beginning. And so more and more people have started to go back to their local communities, which is, of course, awesome. You want to, the best way, I think, to celebrate Mass and to celebrate any liturgies, to be together as well, and to be there in real life. And I was at the same time was noticing that it started to cost me, really, because from a situation where I had multiple people helping me to do this every week, I had to do it all by myself. And I was, if you've ever seen one of those streams, I was just basically celebrating Mass in what was my bedroom. And I just had one camera on a tripod, but I knew that some people really needed this because they had no alternative. But having to do that all by myself, in addition to the work that I do here in the parishes, because I'm assisting in Father Henry's parish locations every week, it really started to weigh. And especially sometimes when Father Henry, for instance, fell ill. He had COVID himself just 2 weeks ago. I needed to take over all his masses, and then in addition to that, I had to do the live stream, and it was too much, and I was getting so exhausted also because the kind of homilies that I would do in the parish were very different from the ones that I did online because I'm talking to a different audience. So basically, I realized that I couldn't keep this up, and I had to somehow stop this energy leak because I needed my energy for other stuff. So I talked about it with the community on Discord, also on Patreon. Got a lot of really good and encouraging feedback, and the majority of the people told me it's fine. It was super useful. It has been a huge help for me during COVID. But we go back to our churches. There are alternatives online. So maybe think about an alternative way to talk about the Bible readings of the weekend. But you don't have to add that, keep doing this extra mass. And I've already been able to see that from the numbers. We went from hundreds of people watching this live to only sometimes just 5 people. Just this last Sunday, I was streaming mass and there were 3 people there. And you know what? If this would be a real parish location, we would have probably gone to those 3 people and say, hey, why don't you join us in one of our other masses? Because this is a little bit too much effort for just a tiny little group. Now, everybody, of course, is important, but sometimes you have to look at the bigger picture and see, well, that energy can also be put can also serve a bigger community. So that's what we decided. And I say we decided. I really believe the patrons, and those are the ones that are carrying my ministry, and me, and maybe also the Holy Spirit, because I prayed about this. We decided that it's time now to let it go. And so this is going to be the first weekend since we started all those years ago. Now, that's not true. There were moments where I was, for instance, moving and I just couldn't do the stream, or when I was ill myself or on vacation. But this is the first time that we're just going to put the streaming mass on hiatus, knowing very well that in case, and may God prevent this from happening, but if there ever is going to be another big global lockdown, of course I'm here to serve. I will be there for you. But right now, we're going to close that down. And that it's just small things, but it's such a relief for me. And it really helps me to kind of focus on, for instance, on this, on just bringing you these podcasts. So I hope, in case you hadn't heard this already, I hope that this gives a little bit of background as to why I started to spend these online masses. And of course, I keep thinking about other ways to feed you, because that's what it's all about. I want to be there for you, but I also have to be there for me, or at least I need to prevent myself from getting overworked. So thank you for your understanding. Let's take a look at the news.
Do you know what's going on? This is what's happening in your world.
Face it, Catholics rule. We got Boston, South America, the good part of Ireland, and we're making serious inroads in Mozambique, baby.
You've taken your first step into a larger world.
All right, let's start with a community news update. We've got some new patrons that I want to welcome to the club. And we have Galaxy Lord 1954 EX. Welcome. I'm so glad that you decided to become a patron. Can't wait to get to know you a little bit better. Of course, we have got a Discord server for our patrons where you can introduce yourself. And then we've got Aaron as well, who also joined the community of patrons. Welcome. I hope you're going to have a great time, not just with me, but also with the rest of the community. And then we also have Brian, who upped his monthly donation. So thank you so much. Several of you have been doing that over the past few weeks. I really appreciate it. As you know, we can really use every penny right now. We're still not self-sufficient financially because I don't work for television anymore. And a lot of that income was carrying basically the online work. But thanks to my existing patrons who have, and of course, I want you to be responsible with your money and only give more if you are able to. But if there are other priorities in your life, never feel guilty about that. You make the decision. And I'll just blame God, right? Providence. God should take care of his own. If he wants this work, then yeah, he will inspire people to support. But anyway, thanks so much for all your support. Then I've got another update. This is a more personal thing. I bought books. Now, this may seem a bit trivial, right? Yeah. So you bought a book. Big deal. No, I bought a real paper book, and not just one, about 5 or 6. And that's kind of new to my life because I've gotten rid of like 95% of all my books in the past. So why did I buy books? It's because I discovered a few gift cards. So in the Netherlands, I don't know if this exists elsewhere. We have the classic present that you give someone for a birthday party, for instance, and you don't know what to give, or you just don't want to bother thinking about something personal. You give people a gift card, but it's usually for books. It's only recently that we got a whole slew of other type of gift cards. So now you can even do like a Netflix or a Disney Plus gift card, which is kind of cool because you give people basically a month of entertainment. So that's a lot of hours that you facilitate. But it all started with these book gift cards. The thing was, you could only buy books. You could only spend this money in a bookstore. So it got even worse in this case because these gift cards that I found were actually meant for this one bookstore in Hilversum. So I got these gift cards. So at the end of the year, usually around Christmas, the broadcasting company that I worked for, they did this Christmas gathering, and then they would hand us this gift card as a Christmas present. However, it was this one single bookstore where you could spend it in Hilversum, which is pretty far away, for me at least right now. And then the other thing was they were only valid for 1 year. So I was cleaning up my house, and I was like, oh, I've got these gift cards. Wait a minute. I got to go all the way to Hilversum. When do I go there? I don't really do TV anymore, at least not right now. Maybe that will change. But right now I don't have this, reason to go to Hilversum. Plus, I looked at the back of the card and it said it only valid until the 1st of the 31st of December 2021. But then that was still in the middle of COVID. Like these stores were closed. So I this past, when was it, Thursday? Yeah, Thursday. I had an appointment in Hilversum to talk a little bit about, give people there an update, what I was doing, what they were working on, see if maybe there's future collaboration that is possible. So that was very interesting. Hopefully that will lead to maybe some new stuff that I can do on TV. But then I was in Hilversum, so I took the card. I went to the store, and I told them my conundrum. I said, I had these gift cards, but I couldn't spend it because it was COVID. You guys were closed down, and I don't come here that often anymore. And they told me, oh, sure, no worries. You can spend it. Just go and shop around. And then, this was a very big bookstore, kind of a big, like a smaller Barnes & Noble, if you're from the US. So it's very nice I like these bookstores because it's not just about books. It's also about the atmosphere. They sell a lot of other stuff as well. But then for me, the big problem was, so what am I going to buy? Because I read mostly either on my Kindle or I listen to audiobooks. What makes me want to buy a book? It needs to be something that is not available in an ebook form, and maybe the form of the book has added value. Like sometimes I love the coffee table books. You've got these beautiful, I've got this huge book, weighs a ton, and it's got all these pictures of behind the scenes when they were filming A New Hope. And it's like an entire history of how that film came about. That, of course, is a book I'm not going to do away with. And that would be really hard to read on a tiny Kindle screen or even on an iPad screen. So for those books, it has added value. What are other books? Sometimes you have books with lots of illustrations where the illustrations are really important. And I I tend to not like to see illustrations on a black and white Kindle because it's very small. It makes the book very slow to read. So for books with lots of illustrations, I usually get a book. Or you will have books that have just been published. And sometimes they're just Dutch books that are not available in other languages, let alone available on the Kindle store. So to give you a summary of this very, very long intro, it took me 4 hours. I spent 4 hours in that bookstore to finally make a decision. And then, of course, I had to calculate the price. Am I reaching what was it in total? Like I had one gift card for $40 and another one for $35. So the total amount should be around $75. I went over, of course, because books. And I ended up buying the most eclectic collection of books. The first one was very cool, just came out. It was so new that I even didn't have it in their computers yet. So that took about 15 minutes for them to enter it into the system, much to the chagrin of the other people that were waiting to get served. It's written by Jens Andersen, and it's called Lego, the story of the toy of the century. This is a Dutch version of the book. The name of the author kind of makes me think that it's probably also a Danish author. So this may be a translation. I haven't been able to find this in an English version yet, but it's basically a thick book. It's like 500 pages, lots of illustrations of the history of Lego and how that family, because it's a family business, how that evolved over time. And I'm a huge Lego fan. So I was like, yeah. And it's got all these black and white photos. I've never seen a book like this. So yeah, I definitely want to read that. Then I bought the Dutch translation of the Silmarillion, beautifully bound book. Lots of, at least, I'm not sure if there are illustrations on the inside, but definitely it's got all the maps and stuff and the indexes that Tolkien wrote. And so it's the Silmarillion in Dutch. I've tried to read the Silmarillion. Never really made it to not even half the book. Then I tried to listen to the audiobook version, which was very helpful because it's beautifully narrated, but it's still in English. You've got all these names and you don't have the tables and the maps and stuff. And so I saw this one. I was like, okay, this is in Dutch. So it's easier for me to read. And it's really one of those books that you just want to have on your bookshelves. So whenever you're watching Rings of Power and they are referencing stuff that happened in the Second or the First Age, I can just pick up my Dutch copy and look it up. So I'm so happy to finally have the Dutch translation of the Silmarillion. The next book that I bought is also focusing on Tolkien, but this was written by, I think, a Belgian author. And also, this book had just come out, I think. So it's brand new. It's written by Johan van Hecke. And it's called In the... how'd you say that? In the grip of hobbits and elves. So The Lord of the Rings in Dutch is... The title of The Lord of the Rings is, in translation, In the Grip of the Ring. Which is kind of already kind of spoiling what the story is going to be about. And so they use that title to like a play on that title. And so this is a huge fan of Tolkien, really a scholar. And he wrote about his own passion for Tolkien's work. And it's not just about Tolkien and about his books, but it's also about the whole like cultural impact of The Lord of the Rings and of the works of Tolkien on society, on art, on entertainment. So I'm really looking forward to reading that. Then I bought a very simple Japanese cookbook. Now, I already have a ton of cookbooks, and I have to be honest, I barely ever look at them because it's always a lot of text and you have to like look at it. It's just a hassle. I'd just rather watch a 1-minute TikTok video and try to replicate that. But for this, I made an exemption because this is a Japanese cookbook. And what I love about it, it only uses between 3 and 5 ingredients. And on the left side of the page, you have a photo of the dish. And on the right side of the page, it's just these very simple steps. Do this, add this, cook it that way. And then boom, you have what's on the left page. ideally, of course. And I love that because it was cheap, like €7.50. But there are a lot of dishes there that I've already seen on TikTok, and I'm just going to work my way through the entire book. I want to make every single recipe, and it's written in Dutch. So it also is done with ingredients and measurements that work for me as a Dutch amateur cook. So again, oftentimes what frustrates me is I see this TikTok video and then I look up how to make it. And it's all stuff that you cannot buy in the Netherlands. And it's got all these measurements with cups and ounces and stuff. And I have to do all the calculation. What is that in a metric system? So this book makes my life a little bit easier, I should say. And then the final book is an autobiography of David Attenborough. It's called Life on Air. It's a Sunday Times bestseller. I think this is the Dutch version. I'm not even sure. Is this Dutch or is it? I didn't even notice when I bought it. But I'm fascinated by the media career of David Attenborough, and it's a book full of stories and anecdotes. And I want to know more about this guy. I love reading biographies and autobiographies, and especially someone as iconic as David Attenborough. Yeah, definitely had to check that out. So that was basically my news. I bought a couple of books, and I haven't seen any of these in ebook form. Maybe I'm wrong because there was spotty internet in the bookstore, so I tried to look it up. I was going to buy a lot of fantasy books, but then I figured, yeah, those are going to be on sale at one point or another on the Kindle bookstore. So yeah, and the problem with fantasy books, a lot of them are like 600-700 pages. I saw the Priory of the Orange something, which is a book that I bought already in ebook form. Now I saw what the paper book looks like, and it's basically like a kilogram and a half. It's like a very, very big brick. And then if you want to get the affordable one, which is the paperback version, of course, that will fall apart after reading 600-700 pages. So yeah, I'm so happy that I have a lot of those books in ebook form. But I'm also happy that I have got a few of those books because there is a kind of a special charm to regular paper books.
How do you not like movies?
They're predictable. Like, the guy gets the girl, and that kid sees dead people, and Darth Vader is Luke's father.
Not liking movies is like not liking puppies.
They're fine. I just get bored and never make it to the end.
You know, you need a movie education. You need a movication. Now I'm gonna give it to you.
All right, so much to talk about when it comes to TV shows. First of all, I'm super excited that I finally have access to Crunchyroll. Now, Crunchyroll was totally unknown to me. I'd never heard of Crunchyroll, but in my previous parish, there was this one youth worker, and she was very much into anime. Never actually knew that until I bumped into her on a Comic-Con. We've got Dutch Comic-Con. It's coming up in a couple of weeks from now. I've got tickets because, I'm a fan of all that geeky culture. And so I was there, and then I hear my voice. I was like, wait, you are here? What are you doing here? And then she told me, yeah, I'm actually a huge, secretly, I'm a huge anime fan. So I'm always here. And then she told me about Crunchyroll, which is the platform, because I only was watching, I wasn't watching much anime, and the few things that I wanted to check out were on Netflix. And there's a little bit of anime on Amazon Prime as well. She's told me that now Crunchyroll, that's the place to be. I think right now Crunchyroll is also taken over. It used to be an independent site, and now Sony has bought it. But Crunchyroll enables you to watch for free a part of their catalog, not everything. So the cool stuff that everybody's watching, you have to pay for that, obviously. And then, of course, if you get the free account, you get a lot of ads. And it just drove me insane. I'm so done with advertisements. I know that Netflix has just launched their free, not even free. You have to, but their cheapest subscription right now, $6.99, has advertisements. And I think it's like 4 or 5 ads, 1-minute ads per hour. I mean, how can you even watch a movie going back to, I mean, wasn't this why we went to streaming models, why we wanted to get subscriptions to all these streaming platforms? It's to get rid of the ads, and now they're bringing back the ads. Yeah, no, I'm done with that. I don't want that. I don't mind ads, but not when I'm trying to spend my precious time that I have for movies and TV shows watching ads, and especially because it's so intrusive and it interrupts. When I was in the US, I was watching, was it Paramount Plus or maybe Hulu? One of these was also the kind of the free subscription that Rob had, and I was watching. I don't even know. I don't remember what I was watching, but then every 10 minutes you would get these ads. Oh, no, please. I'd rather pay a little bit more or not watching at all. So Crunchyroll also surprised me with all these ads. And it's like, no, I want to get a subscription. However, it's another subscription. And so what I did was I went into my budgeting software and I looked at what can I cut in order to enable a Crunchyroll subscription. It's kind of my financial minimalism. So, and I need to probably explain this to those of you that don't know the kind of the principles of minimalism is always like, try to focus on what's truly adding value to your life and get rid of what is no longer providing you with value. And the same, I apply the same thing to my entertainment stuff. So if I subscribe to, for instance, the Xbox, because I love that. I'm going to talk about this in the gaming segment as well, but Xbox has a monthly subscription, but that also means that I'm not going to buy new video games. I'm just going to work with what Xbox and the Game Pass offers me. I do that also with, so if one streaming subscription, if I want to add one, where can I downgrade? So for instance, Netflix, I'm seriously considering going back from the current, I've got the HD subscription, but since they introduced the ads, they've upped the video quality of the lowest subscription without ads from just SD, which is very, very low quality, to 720p, which is half the resolution of HD. And I'm thinking, okay, well, 720p, that's basically, if you're watching my live streams, a lot of them are 720p. That's fine. It's not great, especially if you're watching it on a big TV, but it's not as grating as SD, which is, I think, like what used to be DVD quality. So that's definitely below 720p. So it's very blurry. Maybe that's how I can save a couple of bucks. And then, of course, I can afford Crunchyroll. But in this case, I was juggling around some other expenses that I had, and that allowed me to free up budget for Crunchyroll. Now I have Crunchyroll, and it's awesome. It's really cool. I can check out a lot of the anime series that my followers on TikTok are talking about, and yeah, it's a whole new world, a very strange world. I'm still trying to figure out what is worth my time. But I'll just use the input of my followers. They can tell me what's worth my time and what is not. And sometimes it's not what I expect. Sometimes I'm thinking, like, why would you recommend this series to me? And I start watching, and I'm like, now I get it. This is definitely a lot better than I thought it would be. So anyway, that's the first thing that I wanted to talk about. Second thing, the She-Hulk finale. This was interesting. So She-Hulk was a very unconventional new show on Disney Plus, and it's basically the television version of something of a comic book series that was going strong for a lot of years, and it introduces us to the cousin, basically, of Bruce Banner, and she is an attorney at law. But then she gets superpowers. She gets a little bit of the Hulk's blood in her, and so now she's able to transform into the Hulk. But the difference with all the other superheroes is she just wants to continue her work. In fact, she is hired by a superhero law firm. So it's a law firm that does all the superhero cases, and they want her to be actually She-Hulk, but at the same time to just be a regular attorney. So it's very funny. And what made She-Hulk so unique is, well, first of all, funny. It's really a series that doesn't take itself very, very seriously. Akin in a certain way to Deadpool, although it's very family friendly compared to to Deadpool, but it constantly breaks the fourth wall. Now, the fourth wall is a term that comes from television production. If you've ever watched a sitcom with a live audience, Frasier, Friends, The Big Bang Theory, you name it, those television series or those sitcoms were literally filmed in front of a real audience. So they were looking at the set, and the set had only 3 walls. It's the backdrop, and then it's a wall on the left and a wall on the right side. I was reading, by the way, a very funny article. I bought the Lego set of Seinfeld. And Seinfeld takes place on a couple of locations, and one of those locations is the apartment of Seinfeld. And then there was this whole thing on Reddit where fans were looking at the hallway that you sometimes see where part of the action is taking place. And then you've got the apartment, which shows the door to the hallway. But then if you combine those 2 different locations, it doesn't make sense because the hallway actually should go straight through the kitchen. And so all these people trying to figure out, like, but how can we still somehow come up with a real geography, you could say, of the set so that it still makes sense. And of course, you really can't do that because it's just a television set. It's fake. That door does not lead to another corridor. You just see like it's like the staircase in the Big Bang Theory. If you've ever watched the Big Bang Theory, whenever they go down the stairs or up the stairs, they are shown climbing up like 3 or 4 flights of stairs. It's the same set all the time. That staircase does not lead to anything. And they just change a little bit of the set. And then the actors just come from nowhere. They climb up, they go around, they climb up the stairs, and then they all go down and just do the same thing. They slightly change the set, so it feels like they're going up 3 flights of stairs. But of course, you cannot do that in front of a live audience. And so always 3 walls. The 4th wall is where the audience is. So that's an invisible wall. And of course, as an actor, you're not supposed to talk to the audience, because then you break the illusion for the television viewer. But the audience is there. And so what I love about Deadpool is that oftentimes he will just look into the camera and he'll say, hey, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I think this is what's going to happen now. And She-Hulk also does that all the time, where she's turning towards the camera and she's talking to me as a viewer. And she's like, you thought that we would do like the cameo of the week. Yeah, no, we're not going to do that. That's lame. You know that. And then she just returns to whatever is happening on stage. And it's funny. Another series that did this all the time, and now, of course, it's a little bit more creepy, is House of Cards, where Kevin Spacey's character would oftentimes just talk directly to the audience. Now, of course, you don't really want him to talk to you directly because, Kevin Spacey. But She-Hulk also does this. But in the finale, something really interesting happens. And that made a couple of fans very upset. Now, there is not much needed for fans nowadays to get upset and to start complaining on the internet. They broke the 4th wall, but they even broke the 5th wall. Now, what could be the 5th wall? The 5th wall is this idea that the actors and the audience are still kind of complicit. They all play along because they know that this is a fictional story, right? But then, of course, you also have the real storytellers. You've got us. You've got the creators, the writers, the directors. You never see those. If you see them, that totally breaks your, how would you say that? suspension of disbelief. That was what I was going to say. So even in the sitcom, yes, the audience knows that their laughter is being recorded, but it's part of the story. It's part of getting people to laugh along, because laughing is an infectious thing. So what happened in the finale, and I won't spoil it, but they actually break the fifth wall, which is kind of the barrier between, or at least they pretend that they are breaking the fifth wall, is the barrier between the story, the audience, fourth wall, and then the people behind all that, the creators. And I won't tell you how they do it, but it's so funny. But it got so much people up in arms, like, you cannot do this. This is not taking the MCU seriously. You're breaking all the rules. And they didn't realize that is actually something that comic book series have been doing since the dawn of comic book art. Where, like, if you look at Marvel, for instance, there are so many different origin stories. Look at Spider-Man. How often has that origin story been told, even in the movies? And sometimes Aunt May is looking like an old granny. And then in the more recent Spider-Man origin story, Aunt May all of a sudden is a much younger person, and she's even flirting with other people, and fans were up in arms about that. But this is what storytelling is all about. A good story can be retold and can be updated. This is the same outrage that you see towards Rings of Power. Oh, that is not possible because Tolkien would have never allowed it. Well, dude, Tolkien has been changing his own stories. The Hobbit started like a children's story, and then he wrote The Lord of the Rings, and he went back, and he totally changed a number of important things in The Hobbit to make it work more in line with what he wanted to do with The Lord of the Rings. And so authors themselves have been changing their stories, reinterpreting them, going back to them. Why wouldn't modern-day storytellers be able to do that? What's the problem of that? That's how stories work. It's a bit similar to the whole debate about language. You know, you've got these grammar warriors, right? They give themselves the authority to judge everyone who is not using grammar appropriately. Language, to some of these, I'm not talking about everyone, but some of these people will get all upset when language starts to change, when people start to make up words that don't exist. Well, here's news to you. This is something that is inherent to any language. The language that you speak right now and that you think is this absolute thing, well, it's made up. This is a combination of all sorts of influences. The American English, that I'm speaking right now in a bit of an American English accent, but I also add my own Dutchisms in that and my own accent, and this is how language has evolved throughout the centuries. The English that you are listening to right now has been majorly influenced by Nordic languages, by Latin, by French. And that maybe at the time that was also scandalous. Like, how can you not speak French? How can you allow people to not speak Latin? All this purism is basically trying to fix something that cannot be fixed in time, or I should say transfixed. Or you see this same upheaval that you now see in the world of fans that are like, but this is not canon. You cannot do that. You cannot do that with Star Wars. You cannot do that with DC. You cannot do that with Marvel. You see the same attitude in liturgy, in the church, where people sometimes say, but this is not the tradition of the church. We should go all back to the way that the Mass has been celebrated since forever. Well, again, that's not how liturgy works. The liturgy that we celebrate today, is an evolution of all sorts of liturgical practices throughout the centuries. And in fact, the liturgy that was reformed at the Second Vatican Council by the church itself is actually much closer to the way that the older generations in the beginning of church history would celebrate Mass. A lot of the texts that we use are directly taken from first, second century sources. But then there are some people that think or imagine that the Latin Mass, according to the Tridentine Rite, that's what the church should celebrate. This is the only true historic traditional liturgy. It's not. Even the let's say the traditional Tridentine liturgy that they celebrate has been changed throughout the centuries. Has constantly been was pruned, was modified. Things were added, things were taken away. Liturgy too is part of it's in a certain way. Liturgy is also a language. It's something that is alive. It doesn't mean that you can do anything. It's something that also wants to bring people together, and that is why you cannot just make up your own stuff in liturgy. But at the same time, thinking that this is something that should never change, and that always has been the same and will be the same forever, that's just not true historically. And then this brings me finally to maybe our next segment, which is our faith segment, because this also applies to Bible reading. We'll talk about that after I play the jingle.
Catholics rock!
Here at the Peculiar Bunch, we're always happy to tell you everything you always wanted to know about Catholics and their traditions, but you're afraid to ask.
Catholics can be a peculiar bunch. No meat on Friday.
Oh, meat? What do they eat? Light bulbs?
So in this segment of the show, I always try to answer questions that people have or explain things that Christians, Catholics do, because it helps.
Man, you guys got more crazy rules than Blockbuster Video.
So let's talk about how all this applies, even the upheaval that you now see among certain Marvel fans or purists when it comes to what Marvel should be allowed to do with their franchise or not, as if that is something that fans decide. But let's apply this to the Bible. Because this is a discussion that I've very often had with both Catholics, but also with my my Protestant brothers and sisters. It's like, what is the Bible, and how literally should you take the Bible? And I was a bit stunned because I've been brought up as a Catholic, of course, and so as a child, we went to church every weekend. As an altar boy, I even went to church for years, almost every day, because I was serving Mass. So my life has been constantly filled on a daily basis by Bible readings. And so because the Catholic liturgy has these Bible schematics, how would you say that? So there are 3 years where we read different parts of the Bible. Even in daily Mass, you have 2 years where they alternate, and one year you read this and this and this, and the other year you read that and that and that. So if you go to church every day for years, you will get through a whole bunch of Bible readings, and the ideal is that if you follow the liturgical year for a couple of years, you'll have read most of the important books of the Bible. And so what always struck me was that the Bible is so diverse. It's not one book. We call it the Bible, but it's not the Bible. It's a whole collection of biblical books that are talking about hundreds of years of history. And so the style of the writing is very different. the background in which these stories were written down, the context, the historical context, cultural context, very different from one book to another. The nature of the books that form the Bible is very different from one book to another. You have letters. You've got these eyewitness accounts to a certain extent, the gospel writings, where they try to write down what they heard about from the eyewitnesses, what Jesus did. You've got historical accounts. You've got war reporting, so we had this war. Let me tell you the story, the history of this and that war. But that was sometimes written down centuries later, You've got poems, the Psalms, for instance. You've got wisdom books, where it's just a whole collection of sayings and beautiful quotes. You've got apocalyptic literature, which is a very specific genre that exists also outside of the Bible. For instance, the last book, the book of Revelations, is a very particular literary genre. You've got the origin stories like Genesis that tries to tell you in an abbreviated form. So let me tell you the story of how this world came about. And that first thing that I said, that is super important. Let me tell you the story of. That is what the Bible is. It's not a collection of facts. It is a story that people have, at one point in history, started to write down after it had been handed over from generation to generation orally. And, well, you know how this works, right? When you tell a story, even if it's a story about your own life, someone tells you, well, tell me about that one time that you got COVID. You don't say, well, okay, so it was 3 minutes past the hour on Thursday the 28th. And then this happened, and then my temperature went up 2 degrees, and then an hour later it went up like 4 degrees. That's when we started to get a little bit more nervous, and then we took this and this medication. No, you tell a story. You simplify it, you condense things, you focus on what was important to you at the time. Like, I felt so terrible. I was so anxious. I was afraid that I would die. I was unable to breathe. And then that's how stories are told, right? And oftentimes you will add your interpretation. You will sometimes, depending on who you're talking to, you will add a lesson. And that is why, from that moment on, I was really careful with not just my own health, but also the health of others. That's why I'm always worried that not only about my own health, but I'm wearing masks so I don't infect other people. And so should we all do, something like that. If people ask me about, so how did you become a priest? I tell my vocation story. The way in which I tell this vocation story has changed over the years. It's not that I am like just making up stuff, but I'm reinterpreting my own history, and I tell it depending on what I've learned over time. It's also, the older you get, the more you start to understand yourself, and you figure out, so that is probably the major impact, the major influence here. And this is also how the Bible came about. It's a story that people told one another over time. And so that story contains a lot of interpretations, a lot of elements that are not necessarily part of the original story, but that were important to the people that were listening. And you know what? A lot of people get upset about that, especially if you talk with more Protestants of a more fundamentalistic type or of denomination. It's like, but so it's not true. You're telling me that these Bible writers were just making up stuff and they were just adding things that never happened? No, it says that this person was actually reached the age of 1,000 years, or so. Well, it's in the Bible. It has to be true, because if that is not factually true, then all the other stuff can also be basically ignored, but that's a very shallow idea of what truth is, and what storytelling is all about. And this often reminds me of these discussions that you have with these people that are like adamant that no, there are no dinosaurs in the Bible, so dinosaurs cannot have existed, or the world was created exactly in 6 days, and then on the seventh day God rested, and the world is the Bible gives some numbers. So these people that are talking about the Big Bang, of course, they're totally inspired by the devil, but that's just to make us doubt the veracity of the Word of God. Like, you know what? You know who came up with that idea of the Big Bang Theory? That was actually a priest. Believe it or not. The church has always, at least the Catholic Church, has always been learning from science. They too have made their mistakes and were sometimes very reluctant to go along with what science discovered. But over time, I think the Catholic Church has a very healthy respect for science, and but also is very much aware that the way that we tell stories is never completely congruent. That's why it's a story. And the church fathers and also the bishops over a long period of time have always allowed this, what you could say, this kind of plasticity or fluidity, you could say, of the biblical narrative. After all, it's a church that determined this is the Bible. These books are part of the Bible. These books are not part of the Bible. So that's not an angel who said, "Okay, this is it. Here's the Bible. This is what God wrote, and just copy this." No, that's just not how it worked. But the church did this knowing very well that a lot of these stories don't match up. For instance, I don't know if you know this, but the Genesis, the Bible of the story of the origin of the world, how God created the world, there are 2 versions of that. Go back, read Genesis. This is the Bible, but there are 2 stories, and they don't match up. And this also happens with certain wars. We know from historical research that sometimes these wars, the story that we find in the Bible, cannot possibly have happened like that. And then sometimes there are like kings or events that are placed inside a story, but they're from a totally different era. Sometimes a story will tell you about a certain success or a victory, and we know from other sources that is not how it happened. And yet it's still the Bible, so it has to be true, right? But how can that be true if it's not literally true? Because it's storytelling. Because stories have a function in relationship to their time, to their audience. And this is why the church has allowed to have 4 gospels, not just one. It didn't say, oh, well, it's Luke. You have to read Luke. That's what really happened. And then John made up some stuff, and Matthew made up some stuff, and Mark made up some. No. The church says there are 4 gospels. And these 4 gospels tell more or less the same story of the life of Jesus and what happened. But they do it in story form. So the emphasis may change. The audience, we know this, is different for these gospel writers. Matthew wrote for an audience that was very familiar with the Jewish culture. Luke was more, and Mark were more trying to talk to people from all sorts of backgrounds and also pagan backgrounds. So they put different emphasis. They sometimes will, some gospel writers will take a few events and tell one story, and they will use the elements from these different events, whereas in another gospel, it's like, oh, wait a minute. For instance, the multiplication of the bread. That happened once, right? That's in the Bible. It happened. No. There are 2 versions of that story. It happened twice. There's so many of these things. And I think that is fascinating. Then you've got John, who's much more of a theologian. He not only does he tell a story, but he also adds his, he tries to tell the bigger picture of this. That's why it starts with the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, etc. So he almost adds like a Genesis type of origin story to Jesus. So we understand that it's not just this one guy from Nazareth, but there is more to this. This is about God himself who became man, etc. And this is what storytelling is all about. And if you don't understand that, then nothing makes sense anymore. And this is why, as a Catholic and as a theologian and as a biblical scholar, I am not at all upset that these canons change over time. That at one point, when Disney bought Lucasfilm, they said, hey, you know what? Great, all this expanded universe stuff. We love it. But yeah, we want to go in a different direction. So from henceforth, this is going to be legend. This legendary stuff. Good stories. We continue to sell them. We hope that you will read them. But they're no longer part of the canon. And a lot of Star Wars fans, me included, were like, oh, but you can't do that. That's called canon. You cannot change that. And then gave it some thought. It's like, yeah, why not? If they can tell new stories, why not? And then they started to take stuff from the older expanded universe and reintroducing them, like Thrawn. It's a great character from Star Wars, and they started to bring him back into the current canon. And that's also something that Marvel does all the time. The MCU that we know is very different from a lot of other Marvel stories and timelines. And yeah, of course, you can explain that away by the multiverse, but I wouldn't even be bothered if the whole multiverse was never introduced, because it's a story. It's a story, and the story has a certain meaning in a certain time, and you tell a story differently. Like our television, the themes that Disney now tells story about would have completely not worked 2 generations beforehand. Think of a story like Lightyear, about the real Buzz Lightyear, right? That movie, and I've said this in my review earlier on, that is such a 2022 story. So it's impossible that is the movie that Andy watched and that got him enthusiastic for the toy of Buzz Lightyear. No, that is definitely not... But that's not a problem, because it's a story. So a story has to resonate with our times. And that's why I'm not that upset about the Rings of Power, telling stories that Tolkien didn't write. And maybe, yeah, they're changing some of the lore. Well, big deal. It's a story. It's a good story. If it's a good story, yeah. Why would you be upset? So anyway, the plasticity of stories is part of our understanding of the Bible. It has never bothered Christians for 2,000 years. So let's not get too Bible thumpy when it comes to the MCU or the Star Wars canon or whatever. Learn to be flexible yourself and see these stories. And I'm not saying that these stories are just human stories, right? When it comes to the Bible, there's definitely inspiration. The Holy Spirit is working, and this is the Word of God. But we're always trying to make it so small that we can understand it. And the Holy Spirit can work through so many different literary genres, even through opposing stories and opposing facts. Why not? It's important to listen first, without judging, without thinking that you are the norm of everything. Let the story do its work. And then in there, somehow, mysteriously, you will find the Holy Spirit. You will find God's truth. Anyway, keep an open mind. It'll make you a lot happier. Let me tell you the story of that one time that I made crispy tofu. No, I actually did that. That is a fact. I made crispy tofu the other day in my brand new carbon steel wok. I've been looking for a good wok for months now. I've got an induction plate that I cook with, which I'm very thankful for, especially now that gas is so expensive. But it's also challenging if you're like me, if you like to cook Chinese food. And I was so used to my old wok. And so the other day in Hilversum, after I went to the bookstore, I also went to an Asian store. And I immediately saw that one wok, and it was steel, and it was big and not too heavy. And it was pre-treated or pre-oiled. So I bought it. It was relatively cheap, $27. And I love it already. It's so different. So I've got a few carbon steel IKEA pans, but it's so difficult to do the traditional Asian cooking because it doesn't work. If I try to hustle the ingredients, half of it flies across the room, across the kitchen. So you need a specific form. Ideally, it will be like completely circular. You can't do that with induction, of course, because then there's no contact with the magnets. But now I have like a compromise, which is a flat bottom, but the rest of the pan is really tall, curved. How you call it? The rest of the pan is curved anyway, and so it took me a couple of minutes to get the feel of the pan, but oh man, what a difference it makes! And so yesterday, finally was able to make proper crispy tofu. Very simple recipe. You press the moisture out of the tofu. Very important. I cut it into tiny cubes. I froze that in, so it becomes a bit more chewy. And it becomes very absorbent to a marinade, for instance. I didn't marinate these. I just added some herbs, some paprika powder, some garlic powder, some salt, some pepper, and cornstarch. And I just shook it I put it in a small container. I shook it all together so that all the sides are coated. You heat up the oil. It has to be really hot. And then and you have to use a lot of oil, otherwise it will stick to the bottom and will burn, and that's not nice. And then you fry basically the tofu cubes, and they become really nice brown and crispy. I even used some of the herbs that I normally use for chicken. And so of course, it's tofu. It doesn't taste like chicken. It will never taste like chicken because it's a different material, but the crispiness and the salt and delicious. And then I added the other ingredients, so just some veggies and I ate it with some whole wheat ramen noodles, which is actually very nice and slightly healthier than regular ramen. So I just added it together and just the tofu. I mean, I was expecting something that would be really crunchy, like if you eat it. That was not the case, but so it was still. I mean, like crispy tofu is over-promising, so it wasn't crispy. There is actually a way, I think, to make it more crispy, but then you'd have to add oil into the marinade and maybe even crushed cornflakes or something like that. So you definitely, or the breadcrumb stuff. But I didn't want to do that yet because it wasn't in the recipe that I was following. Maybe next time. Maybe even use egg, like you do. Like first of all, you do you cover them with how would be the best order? It's probably first egg, and then breadcrumbs, and then cornflour or cornstarch, and then put them in the oil. Probably something like that. But then you'd probably have to use a lot of oil and just straight out, fry them like you would fry French fries, for instance. But I don't have that amount of oil. Plus, this is a big wok, so you need like 2 bottles of oil to get to the point where you can actually immerse stuff in there. But anyway, I want to share that with you. Crispy tofu, just Google it and try it out. It definitely changed my overall appreciation of tofu, which has never been my favorite. But I'll make this again.
We are on the cutting edge of technology.
Wow. Well, what does that mean?
Just plug it in. It's going to say, hey, I see you plugged in a new device. And it's going to load in the appropriate drivers. You'll notice that this scanner build... Whoa.
Well, all your technology stuff, it just ends in disaster.
But there is one more thing.
The Meta Quest Pro. is here. This was something that I've been looking forward to for a long time. But I was curious. I wasn't planning on buying the Quest Pro. I was like, I want to know what they're going to do. This was, of course, this is the big project of Meta, formerly known as Facebook. And Mark Zuckerberg himself personally feels that the metaverse, like this new virtual reality, is the future for his business. So he invested millions in it, in the development of that metaverse. But of course, you can develop software, but you need hardware that enables people to have that immersive experience. And we've seen 2 sets of virtual goggles so far. The Quest, or it was at the time was called Oculus, because he just straight out bought another company that was called Oculus. Then they rebaptized the brand into Meta and the Quest. So you've got the Quest 1. I've got that one. And if you've got the Quest 2. No, wait. No, there was one before that. There was the Oculus One, I think. I don't know. Anyway, there was this like almost prototype, and then they did the Quest, and then they did the Quest 2. The Quest 2 is the current model that is affordable, more or less affordable. I still have the regular Quest, which is fine to me. One of the things that I always thought was a limitation of any virtual reality technology is the limited field of view. It feels literally as if you're underwater. If in my youth, I'd love to dive underwater, and you would have these goggles, but they would really limit your field of view. So it felt as if you're looking through tiny binoculars. And for me, VR often felt like that. Like I'm looking, yeah, it's a wonderful world. It's all 3D. But what breaks the immersion is this feeling that I'm watching through binoculars. I want the world to be all around me. Now, this is one of the things that they improved in the Meta Quest Pro. It's got a bigger field of view. It's not there. It's not entirely surrounding you yet. And they introduced another interesting technology that they're still working on because it's not ready yet. It tracks your eye movement. So it knows where you're watching. And I don't know if you know this, but we have actually very, very bad eyes. The only thing that we see very clearly and sharp is like a very tiny part of our field of view. And it's where we're focusing. That is sharp. But if you focus, for instance, on one point in front of you and you try to observe your peripheral field of view, you will notice that it's kind of blurry. Well, that's what they're emulating now in the Oculus Pro, or the Quest Pro, I should say. They're only rendering full high resolution what you're actually looking at, which I think in the end, ultimately, when hardware and software start to really work together, will also save resources, because you don't have to render everything in high definition, just what you're looking at. Now, the other thing that this eyesight observation can help Meta do is to observe your facial expressions. And so this is the big distinguishing factor between what distinguishes the regular Quest from the Quest Pro is that it can actually allow you to express yourself, to smile, to, frown. And I have to say that the demos that they showed were very promising. Again, it's still very early days. But I think that this is super important for, our communication. We rely so much on these subtle cues. And if you're just playing a Teletubby in VR, nobody's going to want to do that. It's not going to replace our social interaction. So ultimately, we will get there. But the thing is, the technology is so lacking in so many areas that I don't think that this Meta Quest Pro is going to revolutionize the industry yet. And it's expensive, $1,500. Now, let's not forget that Apple is also going to bring us, I accidentally pressed the final, the outro button. I need to wrap up. But Apple is also going to bring us their AR glasses. And, well, it's probably also going to be very expensive. So, we're not there yet. Google is also working on improving this technology. Maybe next week I'll talk about something that they showed or demoed the other day, which is also stunning. But we still have a long way to go. I want to wrap up with the quote of the week. And this one is from Arthur Schopenhauer. Reading is thinking with someone else's head instead of one's own. I love that one, and it's so true. Ever since I started reading one book a week, right now I'm reading 2 books a week, my mind has expanded so much because I'm entering into the thoughts and the knowledge of someone else. And the same thing is happening with stories that I read. It places me in someone who has a different view of the world, and that helps me to expand my own view, to learn, sometimes also to know where I stand. I don't always agree with who I'm reading, but it helps me think. So that's why I'm happy with my books. Talk to you next week. Thanks for the privilege of your time. God bless. And that's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen, and that is how the soup is made. This is how I do my shows. So, was it Piotr in the chat who said, please stay focused. You're talking about so many different topics. Stay on topic. As Margot already explained, this is kind of the way I do the show. This is meant to be a bit like a radio show, where you cannot have a discussion that goes on for 1 hour. Already, I'm oftentimes very wordy, but I force myself to have these different breaks, hence the jingles, so I don't drone on and on and on and on about the same thing. And that kind of keeps it hopefully interesting, because you don't know what the next topic is going to be about. That's how I do it. Not every podcaster does it this way, but this is just what I do. There you go. Hope that explains it. Let me go through your comments here. Let me put on my glasses. I was supposed to do Star Wars. I think I'm going to do that tomorrow evening because I'm hungry. Let's see. So, Chris, you didn't like She-Hulk. I hope that from my review, you understand why I like She-Hulk. It's not my favorite Marvel series, but I liked it because they're doing something different. And I love the meta thing. Werewolf by Night. Yeah, I heard a lot of good things about that. I thought it was a series, but apparently it's a short film. Oh, I'll definitely check it out. Thanks for the tip. Margot says, we usually default to Amazon gift cards here in the US for birthday parties, I assume. Yeah, Amazon has only been in the Netherlands for 3 years now. So, yeah, and let's be honest, even in the US, Amazon is a relatively new company. David Attenborough is a national treasure. Yeah. Is he local? Cool. He's great. He lives in Richmond. Grammar Warriors, Oxford, comma. Is that the comma with the 2 spaces? That's also apparently a thing in the US where they will also always add like 2 spaces instead of 1, which comes from the typewriter era. Hey, Amzival. Light bulbs for dinner. LED light bulbs have less calories. Linguistic fundamentalism, biblical fundamentalism, liturgical fundamentalism, in the US constitutional fundamentalism, comic book fundamentalism. It's all rooted in the same thing. Well, that's often something that I've been wondering about, is how maybe, this is a theory that I have, but maybe some of the extreme polarization that you see in the US, specifically in the US, and for me as a European, it's sometimes hard to follow and to understand, but that fundamentalism that you also see among Catholics, that you see in these fandoms, I wonder if there is not something to kind of this fundamentalist Protestant influence that is at work there. It's the same mindset, as you say, Margot. I don't know. Or maybe it's just working both ways, but I always kind of like that Catholic, more broader, let's not get upset, let's first listen, let's explore. Like it's also, in Italy, you have that same mentality. It's like, well, you know what? Even if the story isn't true per se, it's still a good story. Se non è vero, è ben trovato, they say in Italian. If it's not true, it's really well made up. It's a good, I like, that's a very Catholic attitude, I think. Of course, in science, you would probably not, well, Schrödinger's cat, the cat can be there or can not be there, can both be true. Piotr started reading the Bible from start to end. Oh, wow. But yeah, the whole idea that people lived hundreds of years is something that is not just exclusive to the Bible. That was also a trope, you could even say, in other types of literature, in other mythology. And is that possible? I don't know, but it wants to say something about the importance about these people. So it's a narrative way to say, well, these people are so important that they might as well have lived centuries because their impact was felt even hundreds of years later. So in a certain way, they did live for hundreds of years. Father Mike's Bible in a podcast, over Bible in a Year podcast really explains these kind of things very, very well. Yeah, Joseph Lemaitre was the Belgian priest who came up with the Big Bang Theory. She-Hulk has nothing to the Bible. Okay, well, it was not about She-Hulk in the Bible, but it was about what She-Hulk does narratively. Sandy enjoyed this. Remember asking how a Bible story could be true if it had been told by different people in different times. I was told to be quiet. Yeah, that's the worst thing you can do. It's like not asking questions. It's part of the Jewish tradition is to always ask questions, especially the most embarrassing, difficult ones to answer. Why is it that this night is so special and so different from all other nights? That's the question that the kids have to ask at Passover. It's so fundamental to faith, is that you ask questions. It's only by asking questions that you can find the truth. And asking questions means that you have an open mind. That's why I really dislike some of these people on YouTube that are like, but this is wrong, and this, the gatekeepers. Oh, you cannot do that to the lore. You are not a true Star Wars fan unless you think like me. Sure. Forget the Swedish chef. We have the Dutch priest throwing food all over the kitchen. Oh yeah, that must be it. Yeah. Birdie, 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 birdie. All right. Yeah, Margot, love to see your version of crispy baked tofu. I'm just lazy whenever I know that if I post a picture of something that I've cooked, I always get questions like, recipe, please? Please, the recipe? Yes, I'm waiting here. I'm like, my recipe? www.google.com. Everybody's looking at their peripheral vision. Hey, Zdenek. I love your name. Zdenek, I think you pronounce it. I'll try your last name. Stojaspal. Is that correct? Stojaspal? From Prague. Wonderful. Congrats with your daughter. Oh yeah, Amazon only sold books. That's true. What does the Hulk have to do with the Bible? What chat am I reading? So, Snickerskittle, I'm streaming this to 3 channels. To Twitter, to YouTube and to Facebook. So that's why I'm reading the comments. You're watching this on YouTube, so you can only see the other YouTube comments. So in case you're wondering what the Hulk has to do with the Bible, you have to go back to the rest of the show, because I've been doing this for how long now? An hour and a half now. So I was talking about that. If you've seen the finale, you know that it goes very meta, right? And so some people got very upset. It breaks the lore. You cannot do this to the MCU. And I compared that to some of the people that take the Bible super literally. And I was talking about like narrative theory and what is the Bible and how should you read it. And that also applies, that same mindset can also apply to these MCU canon things and to what the Hulk does. It's the plasticity that you need to understand what stories are about. So if you want to hear that whole explanation, you have to go back in the stream and look that up, or listen to the podcast, or you can just browse through the audio. Anyway, so that was so sorry for the confusion. Yeah, I know that what you see here, normally when I go live, I have up there the topic of conversation, but this is my podcast, and in my podcast I talk about a ton of things, so I couldn't put that in the layout. So anyway, hope that helps. Hey, I'm gonna make some food, not crispy tofu, but I'm definitely going to cook with my wok. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful time. And for those of you that were waiting for my review of Andor 456, I'm running out of time today, but I will do that tomorrow around 5 Central European time. That would be 11 Eastern, 8 o'clock West Coast Pacific time. All right. Talk to you all later. And thanks for hopping by.